I want you to sit with somebody who is much older than you and ask them what their biggest regret in life is. And I guarantee you, most of them will tell you, I wish I didn't live my life for other people. You don't want to reach a point in your life where you look back and you say, I wish I lived differently. I wish I lived more for myself. When you make the decision to not live authentically, when you know very well what that authentic life would look like, you are living in misery day in and day out because you know exactly what you need. You know exactly what you want, and you are seeing yourself as an active participant in the demolition of all of that.
Welcome to another episode of Yalla Let's Talk. Today we have with us, again, Najwa Zebian. Najwa needs no introduction. She has been a frequent guest of ours. So if you haven't listened to the podcast, please check it out. There's already 2 episodes. And now, just for those new listeners who might have discovered this, I'm just going to briefly talk about Najwa. So Najwa Zebian is a Lebanese-Canadian activist, author, poet, educator, and speaker. Najwa rose to fame on Instagram through sharing her Insta poetry and gained popularity during the Me Too movement as an activist. She's a TEDx speaker and is a best-selling author of many books, including Welcome Home. And she has also several different books, Trust Your Heart and Conversations of Letting Go. Thank you once again, Najwa, for coming on Yalla Let's Talk.
Thank you for having me again.
It's always an honor. And today we want to dive into the topic of authenticity and navigating cultural expectations. I want to start off by just asking, what does authenticity mean?
Authenticity is being fully and unapologetically yourself. It's not pretending to be someone you're not just so that you could please someone else. It's not hiding parts of who you are and filtering yourself just so that someone else could like you or approve of you. Authenticity at the end of the day is, are you able to fully be yourself? If you're not, then that tells you not only things about yourself that you need to work on, but it could also be telling you what kind of environment you're in and what environmental changes you need to make. What people do you need to surround yourself by? Because it's a two-way street. When you can be in an environment where you are allowed to fully be yourself, you are going to more comfortably be yourself. And if you're in an environment that tells you, if you walk in with these parts of you, you're not welcome, then you're very likely to compromise your authenticity for fitting into that environment.
I love that. I love how authenticity to you is really you being yourself and creating an environment or being in an environment that allows you to be yourself. I think where I want to go with this now is culture and authenticity, because sometimes we can't have a conversation about authenticity without talking about culture and religion. How can we reconcile being authentic but also adhering to cultural norms as well as faith?
Sometimes those two things come at odds and you have to make a decision. Do I choose myself or do I choose belonging or fitting in to a certain cultural group or religious group? Sometimes we look for an answer that allows us to be fully authentic while we are in a place or embedded in a certain value system that doesn't align with who we are. So what happens when that's the case is that we start hiding parts of who we really are when we are in settings where that value system is present or whatever. So we start hiding parts of our lives. We start becoming secretive, which could be very dangerous. Because let's say part of the cultural system that you're embedded in says you can't date. You can only get married. You date to get married. You can't just go out and explore and figure out what you want. But you really do believe on your own, separate from that value system, that cultural system, You believe that you have the right to go out and figure out what you like and what kind of person you want to be with. You believe that you need to have experiences before you decide this is the person that I'm going to marry. But if you know that that cultural system doesn't allow that or welcome that, but you still want to be part of that cultural system, then you will go out and do what you want to do in secret. What if something dangerous happens to you? What if someone abuses you in some way on those experiences that you're having? Then if you're not able to come back to that system and say, I'm hurt, help me, then question why it is that you so badly want to be part of that cultural system or that set of beliefs.
I liked how you said that you have to sometimes decide what is more important for you. Is it really being authentic to yourself and finding an environment that celebrates you and embraces you, or is it being part of that group? I think the follow-up question I have is that for some of us, it's easy to kind of like be like, okay, I'm going to be authentic. And for others, it's going to be like, I want to belong to this group. But what advice would you give to someone who is struggling to reconcile because they do value being part of that religious or cultural group? They do believe in that faith, for example. At the same time, there is a part of them that wants to be authentic, that conflicts.
I'm going to begin by saying you really have to ask yourself, why is it that you so badly want to be part of that system, of that group? If that system or group does not welcome your authenticity, that's the first question you need to ask yourself. Do you really want to be part of that, or do you want to be part of something? Do you really want to belong to that, or do you want to feel like you are worthy of belonging? Because at the end of the day, if you can't fully show up as your authentic self in any group setting or in any environment, any given environment, whether it's a mosque or any kind of religious context that we're talking about, then what are you fighting for in saying, I want to be part of that? Are you fighting for that setting to change in a way that says, I welcome your authenticity? Or are you fighting for that setting to welcome you so that you can say, my authentic self is okay? Maybe you're looking for validation that you being authentic and what that authenticity looks like is valid. And you think that if that setting validates that authenticity, then it must be valid. But at the end of the day, you're the only one who gets to decide whether your authenticity is valid or not. Because I think what happens is we get bombarded with guilt from others. Like, you're doing something wrong, or you're doing something that goes against what we believe, or you're doing something that just shows us that you are fundamentally a bad person, when really you're just making decisions for yourself. And so you might sacrifice your own life and your own path to please those people. So I want to come back to the reconciliation part. Sometimes the only reconciliation is for you to say, this is who I am, and I understand that I will never be welcome into that environment, into that setting. And I'm going to choose that when I have time to myself or among people who do welcome me as I am and do celebrate my authenticity, I am going to fully exercise that. And if I wish to keep a connection with that culture or religion or whatever the group is, then I'm not going to sacrifice my authenticity to be part of that. I might walk into that setting and not show parts of me that I know would put me in danger if I were to show them. So you get to limit and decide who you're going to be in different settings in your life.
And what I love about this whole entire point you just made is that it's not really about reconciling faith or values. It's really reconciling which environment you can be in, because the
Yes.
values are really yours. The faith is within you. So it's whatever it is that you believe in, your core values, and whoever you are, you can be that person. It's really deciding which environments to be in to allow you to be yourself authentically and fully.
Because there are people who share your same faith and values who will never look at you living your authentic life and say something like, you're a bad person. Because they understand that faith is personal. They understand that you are a human who gets to make your own decisions. It has no bearing on how worthy you are of being loved or respected or accepted. There are people like that. So keep that focus in mind, that you get to choose who to surround yourself with, and you get to choose what messages that are sent to you from others, whether it's an actual text message or a way that they're making you feel or think about yourself. You get to choose what you believe and what you don't.
I love that. And I think a lot of people just saw it like this. They're
Yeah.
empowered then to move forward, to be who they want to be. Because, and I think you said this actually on the first episode you were with us, which is, if you're really living a life for others, is it really worth it?
Yeah.
Right? We grow up in a culture where the way we derive happiness is making sure that our parents are happy. And again, similar to how sometimes culture or religion can conflict with authenticity, sometimes being your true self and making decisions that are best for you, that expresses who you are, may conflict with what your parents want for you. So, and a lot of times we grow up with that guilt and we have to make that decision. What advice would you give to someone who has to make a decision like that?
What happens in certain cultures is there's this thought system that's like, if my son or my daughter does something and it reflects badly on them in the eyes of those who believe the same thing I believe, then it reflects badly on me as a parent. Therefore, I'm not going to allow my children to live their lives the way that they want, because there's always that reputation piece. It reflects on me. And so for a person who is in a position where their parents are pressuring them to let go of certain parts of who they really are just so that they could be perceived by them and by those around them who believe in the same thing, I would say you have to decide to disconnect yourself from that whole. And I know some people are going to listen to me and say, you're giving people the wrong advice, like you're telling people to go on the wrong path. That's not what I'm saying at all. The wrong path for every person is different. And the right path for every person is different. But you're assuming that the right path, without a shadow of a doubt, is one that your parents want for you. And it could be wrong. What if your parents want you to marry someone at 20 years old that you haven't even gotten to know really well? Would you say that they're guiding you in the right direction? You make up your mind. The answer doesn't have to be yes or no. I'm not trying to veer you in any direction, but think for yourself. And if your parents are genuinely saying, I'm worried about your safety or your security or something bad happening to you, that's different from, you are going to do as I say, and these are the rules that you're going to follow. Like, I'll give you an example from my life. So I moved out of my parents' home when I was 27. I may have talked about this before because I've discussed it in other podcasts, but people in our culture, women, don't move out of their parents' home. Specifically women. I know some men also get the same kind of backlash, but it's not the same for women. You can't move out of your parents' home before you're married, because what are you going to do on your own? Why is it that you want to move out? You move out when you get married. Something like that, to me, at one point in my life, I was like, so you're telling me that the only full freedom that I could have is when I move into another man's house Like that didn't make any sense to me. So I started forming my own beliefs. I started giving myself permission to decide what made sense to me as the right path for me versus what I was taught that the right path was for me. So if you're listening to this, just remember you can question all this black and white difference between this is the right path, this is the wrong path. And we know this from the real world. You don't learn without making mistakes. You don't learn without taking
Absolutely.
risks. You don't build a different life for yourself than the one that you were taught you could have without deciding to give that life a shot. So you can love your parents, you can respect them. Your relationship with them is a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street where you do as they say. If they say, if you move out or if you live your life in this way, we're not your parents anymore, that's a decision they're making to make you scared that you will lose the bond that you have with them over a decision that you made for yourself. That's a decision they're making. It's not oh, the responsibility is 100% on me for keeping the relationship with my parents.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know that I have friends when they've expressed their authentic selves in different forms, whether it's a woman that has decided to move out and, venture off and explore different parts of herself and her identity, or whether it's a man who's coming out. There is that risk that a parent may completely disconnect. One, for me, when I hear that, it breaks my heart, because it is something where I find, parents should give you unconditional love, and we grow up in this idea that love is unconditional. But when it comes to certain aspects of our culture, love is conditional. It's conditional on what our parents want for us. And so a part of me understands this idea of, hey, let's just be authentic and express who we truly are. At the same time, I understand the pain of having to have that risk of parents not coming and talking to you because of a decision you made for yourself. And I guess where I'm going with this is that, what advice do you have for those whose parents have decided to just say, we're going to cut you off. Come back to us when you want to live with us. Come back to us when you want to marry a woman. Come back to us when you want to go to engineering as opposed to going to stand-up comedy. The list can go on.
First of all, I would say that's painful. Feel the pain of the fact that your parents said, we no longer want to be connected to you. That is painful. Some people, I think, mask the pain by saying, well, it's a choice they made. They don't want me in their life. End of story. But that's painful, because those were the first people in your life. Those were the people who taught you who you are and what the world was and what's right and what's wrong and what love feels like and what the lack of love feels like. That's hard to go through. So take some time to really let that sink in. Because if you don't, it's going to affect you in every aspect of your life. That was your first primary connection that you felt. It's with your parents. Moving forward, I would say, remember that you made a decision to stick by yourself and to trust yourself over those who you trusted for the majority of your life. Remember that you made a decision to discover who you are and what you believe, separate from where you came from and what you were taught. Remember that you decided to kind of create a clear canvas in your mind of the possibilities of what could be for you. A clean canvas of the beliefs that you could have, the values that you live by, the future that you envision for yourself, not just in life, but with your career, with the people that you choose to welcome into your life. Those are really courageous and brave decisions to make. And if the cost of making those decisions was losing that primary connection that you had, then yes, that's really sad. But you made that decision for all the greatness that could be in your life as a result of you not sticking to that one solid path that you were taught was the best one for you. Now it's like instead of one path, now you're discovering. It's branching into different, I'm imagining a plant just like blossoming in all the different directions instead of just sticking to what happened in the past and saying, just because this worked out for my parents and their parents and their parents and they continued living this way, then that means I have to continue living this way. Well, what if it doesn't work for you? What if it doesn't welcome who you really are? What if it doesn't welcome your ambition, your purpose? What if it doesn't welcome the beliefs that you developed while you were in school or, as you explored what this world looks like now? What if those two things clash? So there's two options. You either say, I've realized how much greater my life could be, all these other directions I could be going, and I've realized that. I've seen exactly where my life could be if I continue to follow the path that my parents or those around them and those who believe the same thing are saying, that's the path for me. And I've decided this is not the path I want. Here, there's lots of possibilities. So you're either going to decide to crush all of this, really you're crushing yourself, and move forward on a path that the end of that path, and you're not going to be happy. So you've crushed yourself, your ambition, your possibilities, your growth, just so that you could say, well, at least they still welcome me. At least they still accept me. But then you don't welcome yourself and you don't accept yourself. So what kind of a life do you want to live at the end of the day?
It's very powerful. It's a very powerful statement that it is a harsh truth. Sometimes we have to make a decision between ourselves and the people that we do love. And sometimes it happens to be family. I wanted to ask your thoughts on how can we communicate authenticity to older generations, aka to mama and baba? How do we explain authenticity in a way that they can understand and digest it? Because that concept is also very foreign to a lot of immigrant parents.
The conversation could start as you asking one of your parents, if your life could be different, what would it look like? Or if there was a decision in their life that they made early on that they wish they had made a different decision. Because that's what's going to open them up to that struggle that you're going through. Because they can imagine you and they're going back to the age that you were at, and now you're bringing them back to a younger version of themselves. So you're opening up the scene for them to go back to what it felt like to be that young, or to go back to what it felt like to have all those big dreams and ambitions, but then maybe they made a decision that led them to have the life that they currently have. So you're bringing them back to the level where you are at. And that's when you can start talking about what it means to be true to yourself and what it means to you. And they might tell you something like, there's no such thing as being true to yourself. Like, you can't just think of yourself. You have to think of the whole. We talked about this in a previous episode where some people say, you can't say that one person's actions only reflect on themselves. They reflect on the whole. Well, this shows a much more dangerous dynamic enmeshment where your feelings, let's say it's you and your parents, the way you feel, it's like it automatically spills on them. They take the responsibility for making you feel better in the way that they feel about themselves. Or if you make a decision for yourself and they feel a certain way, it's your responsibility to make them feel better. That's the enmeshment dynamic. There's no boundaries. There's no, you stand alone and you have the right to live your life the way that you do. It's like what you do for yourself is not just for yourself, it's reflecting on the entire family. Some people might choose to subscribe to that way of living. I don't. I think every person is responsible for their own actions and for their own way of dealing with how other people's actions in the family make them feel. So if you're in a family where you do feel like there is that dynamic of enmeshment, look it up and there will be tons of articles on it. If you can identify that that's the case, then you might hit a dead end every single time you talk about authenticity. Because authenticity comes down to one person. You can't be authentic in relation to another person. The moment that you have to sacrifice a part of you to be loved or welcomed or respected or accepted by another person, that's no longer authenticity. That's just the attachment that the two of you have. So ask yourself, would you like to continue living in a way where you have that kind of enmeshed dynamic where it can't just be you? It can't be just you. You have to think of the whole. So you might think to yourself, well, maybe when I get married or whatever, then that will change. It won't change, because if you subscribe to that way of living and to the enmeshment dynamic, that's what you are going to accept in your future as well, because it's safe and it's familiar. Your life will not change when someone else comes in to rescue you, like a potential partner or a husband, a wife, whatever. Your life will change when you decide that you are the one driving the car. You are the one driving your life. You're not just sitting in the passenger seat or in the back and just waiting for the driver to change, hoping that the destination they're taking you is better. So you approach the topic with your parents about authenticity. If you find yourself, you'll know if they are okay with it or if they're not. And if you find yourself always getting to a dead end, then you might decide to say, I'm no longer sitting in the back seat of your car and just waiting for you to lead me on the right path. I'm going to get into my own car and drive myself to my own path.
And I love everything you said, because one, when you're approaching the conversation of making a life decision that may conflict with cultural or religious norms, you're not approaching it as, hey, I'm doing this. You're talking from a point of view of like, this is who my authentic self is. This is how I want to live my life. And hopefully when you approach that conversation from a point of compassion and empathy, then they're going to reciprocate on that as well. I just think a lot of the listeners need to understand, why is it important for them to be authentic? What are the benefits of being authentic to yourself?
I want you to sit with somebody who is much older than you and ask them what their biggest regret in life is. And I guarantee you, most of them will tell you, I wish I didn't live my life for other people. I wish that I didn't care or didn't spend so much time caring about what other people thought of my decisions for myself. I wish I spent more time just being myself and taking it easy and not rushing from one thing to the next, thinking that if I get all of this done, then that means I'm okay. They will all give you an answer that will bring it back to the topic of, I wish I spent more time just not stressing out about what my life should be like or how I should be like or pleasing other people. It all comes down to authenticity. So why is it important that you are authentic? A, you don't want to reach a point in your life where you look back and you say, I wish I lived differently. I wish I lived more for myself. B, living a life that's not authentic to you isn't just saying, I'm sacrificing who I am for belonging or for fitting in. It's not just as simple as saying, well, that's a decision I made and then it's over and then you don't deal with the consequences. When you make the decision to not live authentically, when you know very well what that authentic life would look like, you are living in misery day in and day out because you know exactly what you need. You know exactly what you want. And you are seeing yourself as an active participant in the demolition of all of that. So not only are you living in misery because your life doesn't look like the way that you want it to live, or you are not living your life as truly as you would like to, but it's because you feel like you are taking part in that destruction of yourself. And so you fall into shame and judgment and telling yourself it's your fault, and it just further digs a deeper hole for you.
I appreciate you mentioning that. And I do think that that example of just picturing yourself older or talking to someone who is older, number one regret is not living a life for you. It's living a life for others. And it goes back to the authenticity. So I really do appreciate you mentioning about that. So when it comes to the topic of being yourself and being fully authentic, we may receive a lot of advice from different people. What would you say is the worst piece of advice you've ever received when it comes to the topic of authenticity?
I've heard people tell others, don't be too much of yourself, because if you open yourself up that much to someone, then you've given them the keys to hurt you. And that may be very true. When you are fully authentically yourself with someone, they know everything about you, as in what you believe in, what you think is right or wrong, what your past is, what your traumas are. That's being vulnerable and sharing that authenticity of yours with someone else so that you could form a strong connection with them. It's true you do open yourself up to hurt, but that's the only way that you can also open yourself up to love and feeling like you are part of something, or feeling like you are fully held by that person. So the next time someone tells you, don't show all your cards, don't let someone see every part of you, like always keep them on their toes, that's very toxic advice in my view. I would say, take your time in getting to know this person and open up to them bit by bit. And if you sense that they're using something against you, they're belittling you, they're disrespecting you, then you stop. But don't just go all in.
The last question I have for you, Najwa, is when it comes to detachment. So right now, when it comes to being authentic and your true self, we go through this need of letting go of where we thought our life is going to be. So maybe I grew up thinking I'm going to be married by 25, have 5 kids. And as you get older, you realize that this is not something that you want, or you can't necessarily have that. How do we detach from these expectations and be true to who we are?
First of all, grieve the life you thought you should have. Grieve the milestones you thought you should have reached by 25 or 30, or sit with that and sit, just like you would grieve someone who died. Grieve that. What do you do when you grieve someone? You express how much you loved them and all the shared memories and hopes and dreams and whatever. Do that to the life that you thought you needed to live. And then you can say, I thought that without living that life that way, that meant something was fundamentally wrong with me. Now I understand that believing that I had to live a certain way to be okay or enough took me away from asking myself, what life do I actually want? How do I want to go about decisions day in and day out? It robbed me from that. So I'm not going to judge myself for not turning out to be the person I thought I needed to be. And at the same time, I'm not going to resent myself for spending that many years working towards being that person. I'm going to give myself that compassion and that forgiveness and say, today's a new day. I'm not going to be stuck in the past. I'm choosing to move forward. And now I'm in control. I'm the decider.
I love that. I love that the whole entire theme is about agency. It's you are the driver of your own destiny. And I really appreciated you acknowledging the fact that it is okay to grieve the life that you thought you should have. And it's you can't heal what you can't feel. And you
Yes.
should feel that pain for you to be able to overcome it. So on that note, I want to thank you once again for coming on Yalla Let's Talk. Najwa, it's always a pleasure, and it truly is an honor to have you sit with us today and share your insights. I said this once, I said this twice, I said this a million times. You are helping so many people, and we do thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me again. And I hope this helps everyone who listens to it in some way.
I'm sure it will. And just before I wrap things up, I want to leave or give the mic to you to tell people where they can follow you or if there's an exciting project you want to talk about.
Okay. You can find me on all forms of social media. It's at Najwa Zebian. And I have 5 or 6 published books. You can find them on my website. Read Welcome Home, listen to Conversations on Letting Go, and look for my next book that's coming out very, very, very soon. So it's all going to be all about these topics. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with you, and have a lovely day.
On that note, don't forget to rate this episode 5 stars if you enjoyed listening. Don't forget to follow Najwa. Don't forget to follow us. And you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anghami, YouTube, #YallaBye.